From the OGS studios in Miami, Florida, it's the Obsolete Gamer Show.
Always wear a long sleeve. Like if you watch any of my tournaments, I always wear a long sleeve, and I would just pull up the right sleeve a little bit so I could rest my forearm on the mouse. Basically, the reason why I kept a long sleeve on was because it kept me warm. So that helped me a ton, you know, in tournaments. Like when you get cold, you start getting slow, you get nervous. Like you look at athletes, they wear warm-ups all the time before they get out on the field because they want to be warm and loose. So in professional gaming, you're not really ever building up your blood pressure that much unless you're actually in a match because of just nerves and so forth. But I want to be warm, I want to be fluid, I want to be shooting my shots that I need to shoot. So I'm always basically trying to be in a warm-up, you know, or be warm. I don't want to be cold. And so those were some of my few tricks I used to not get nervous in tournaments, and they worked. So it was, you know, I didn't care if it was 90 degrees. I was wearing a fleece.
Welcome to the Obsolete Gamer Show. I am your host, J.A. LaRock, and there's one thing that we love to do, and that is to talk to people who have done awesome things. And there's one thing that you should know, regardless of what you've seen with the Uncharted movie, we are talking to the real Nathan J. And that is Ryan Culver. He is the true man of mystery, international adventurer, and we are glad to have him here with us. Thank you, Ryan, for coming on and talking to us again, because he was on our original podcast, so we are happy to have him on our video edition of our series. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey man, thanks for that's quite an introduction. I'll have to see if I can live up to that mysterious introduction that you gave me.
Oh no, it's true. Come on. I mean, only before when we talked, you know, I mean, you traveling all over the world and doing the adventurer thing. I mean that's just awesome. But you know, just for maybe the people that don't know, and they should definitely do know, one of the reasons that I first learned about you, even before knowing about the other acting things that you've been in, is that the commercial that you did for Sony, where you played Nathan Drake. Can you just take us through that about you know, how you got that in the beginning?
That one's on me. But you remember what we did to Zeus that one time? Let's finish this.
Rated T for teen.
PlayStation.
Yeah, well, it was you know, in the beginning, I didn't know anything about the character. I didn't know anything about the game, and that was just another appointment that I had in town, and I went in and I met the directors and producers of that job a couple times, actually. They had shot the really popular one the year before that included a lot of the other gamers, and the Michael spot that everybody was really familiar with for Sony. And they went back and they wanted to do something a little bit more for the All-Star Battle Royale and do the similar thing where they wanted to take that job that commercial, but they wanted to turn it into something that was a little bit more action-oriented. So they picked a couple of the different really popular games, and they put that spot together. And I went in and I met them, and things things kind of worked out well. I didn't know anything about the game going in, so when I went in and met them, they just had us sort of improv. I didn't know anything about Kratos either, so they said, well, you're fighting this 8 or 9 foot tall, big, huge blue guy with a really angry look on his face. I thought, well, this happens every day to me, so this is no big deal.
And he's a god of war too.
I live in Venice, California, man. I see that every day. So we went through that process, and it was actually a few weeks getting that whole thing underway. So I was here in LA doing some work, and then they called up and they said, hey, we want you to fly to Prague, and we're gonna shoot this job. So I went and met the rest of the cast and crew over in Prague, and we spent a week there, filming that job. It was a great job too. I mean, the guys were really great, and we worked a lot along. Obviously, you can tell that thing takes place at night. It's dark, so we were sleeping during the day and shooting all night, and it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun too. A lot of fun.
And that was the thing. Like, one of the things I really like is in the gaming industry, they're not doing it cheap. I mean, even back in the day, in the 80s, yeah, some of it had a little bit of the cheesy feel, but even back then, they took the time to put the production together. And back when we did the gamer profile, we put the video so that people could see the work that you did, and it looks really well. And of course, I mean, you looked the part, and that's why I was saying, I mean, I consider you the real Nathan Drake, because I mean, you did a really good job, and that's of course, a tribute to your performance, but also the production that they put together looked really well. Since you being in a lot of productions yourself, I mean, would you agree that everything they put together, having it in Prague, the set, everything that they did, was it really well done in your opinion?
Yeah, and it was top notch the whole way through. Those guys, and the way it works a lot of times in foreign productions is you'll end up with about a half of an American crew that will fly over, that will handle the job along with the director. The main creative team will usually be that American, but they'll fill in the rest of the crew with a local crew from that country. So half of our crew was from the Czech Republic. They were from that area. And they were incredibly talented. I mean, all of the, especially a lot of the makeup and hair and wardrobe people who were putting together the look for all of the characters just based on pictures, reference from the games. So not a lot of them didn't have any prior knowledge, but they really came and stepped up their game. They were really talented. Everybody was really talented. In fact, the actor who plays Kratos he's from that area, so he is cast. Even the year before, he was the same actor who was in the Michael spot. He was cast in that area. They shot that out there as well. So it's just, you're really lucky to be able to show up at a place that I think some people probably wouldn't think that it has a lot of talent for the industry. And you show up there and you have these people who are not just really willing to work, but they're really, really talented. And that makes all the difference in the world. And I have I have some pictures and stills and things like that from set from that shoot, and you can even see just looking at the pictures how professional, how well put together, how organized everything was on the set. So, and it had to be. We had safety issues to worry about. We had a really tight shooting schedule to worry about, and none of us even really felt any of that pressure because everything was running like a well-oiled machine there. So, it was a real pleasure to be part of that project.
Now, I know that in the previous podcast you talked about how you did a lot of research by looking at the actual gameplay videos where they string together all the movies and stuff like that, and you learned about the characters and things like that. And since then, did you do any more gameplay? Did you ever get into any more of Uncharted? And also, how do you feel about what they've been doing since then, and with the pending movie? Have you kept up with?
I've kept up with it, and it's that film, if and when it happens. I hope it's not if. I hope it's just when. So when they can kind of get everything put together. It looks like it's starting to move forward again. It's been up and down and back and forth in the industry with different actors attached and different directors and trying to come together on a script and everything else. And that's typical in this town, is trying to figure out who's going to make it, who's going to pay for it, what the story is actually going to be. And I don't, the storyline for me, when I did the original research and I was watching those gameplay movies, I think you just need to get a few actors, point a camera in the same way that they shot the thing for the game and make a movie. I think you'd have a really successful franchise if you did it that way. It's not always the way it's going to get done, and I will certainly keep my nose in there with everybody else who's probably vying. There's many other people vying to be a part of that project when it does come down in Hollywood. But I'll definitely be in the mix, and that's something that's a little bit more out of my control. But I'm going to do everything I can to be part of that project. I'll scrap with the rest of them to get in there and be part of it, because I think it's kind of, I feel like it, again, I think I may have mentioned this in the podcast. I really feel like this is where the interaction gaming and filmmaking is coming together that way. I mean, you have the gaming industry looking to filmmakers to understand how to better encapsulate the storytelling process inside the games, and you have that. You see that when you watch the animation in the games now that helps to tell the story. These are beautifully shot, very cinematographically complex shots that you're seeing inside a video game, and a lot of them originated in filmmaking. And now you've got filmmakers looking to games to try to match a lot of these amazing shots that are being created solely in the computer. And because they can only be created in the computer, you've got these guys in Hollywood now going, well, wait a minute, this would be awesome if we could have that shot in a live-action film. So to be able to take a big video game franchise like this with all its complexity and its beauty and bring it to a live-action screen, I think you really, that's a fantastic ride, and I can imagine that everybody wants to be a part of it, including me. So, yeah, I'll definitely be around that process as it continues to unfold.
And I think that what's great about it is it creates a great dynamic, and it brings a lot of things together. Because what's interesting about something like Uncharted, and it kind of crosses over, a lot of people makes a parallel to something like Indiana Jones, where you have that adventure and exploration aspect of it, where you go to strange lands and you have the treasure hunting, you have the action, you have the adventure. And there are people who will watch something like a Discovery Channel where it's like you're learning about the Mayans or you're going to learn about ancient Egyptians. And people just want to see something new, something ancient, something. And then you have the action aspect, you have the romance, you have the adventure. And I mean, that's something that you know about just in your other job, where you take people and you show them, and people pay you to go to places, and you have all these adventures. And that's why in the beginning I said, adventurer. I mean, you even says so on your Twitter. So it's not like I'm really embellishing; it's true.
All right, you're not making it up. No, that's true.
So, I mean, tell people a little bit about that other aspect, because I mean, this is you as well. I mean, you are an adventurer. So, I mean, extreme sports, you take people around. I mean, this is you, right?
Well, yeah, that's and that's again, when I talk to the guys, the producing team for Sony and PlayStation about the original job when we shot it, they asked me to share a little bit about who I was as a person and what I did, and I think that's maybe one of the things that kind of turned them on to having me around. But yeah, I mean, I've had an adventurous lifestyle for most of my life. Just starting out with extreme sports, rock climbing and skydiving, things like that. But now, as a pilot, I spend a lot of time when I'm not in town working. I head around different parts of the world, and what I have a company with a couple business partners, and what our company does is we fly small people's private, like general aviation aircraft, like small turboprop aircraft, things like that, around the world. So we oftentimes will end up delivering someone's aircraft for them. So what I'll do is I'll jump in a plane and I'll take off over, well, I just got back from China, actually. I think you and I were talking, trying to coordinate when we could sit down, and I was stuck in these small islands in the middle of the Pacific for a number of weeks, and then I finally made it over across Japan and into China, and was stuck there for a little while before I finally made it home. So that is always an adventure. I'm landing in places. I mean, there's literally if you and the viewers go to Google Earth and you go in and zoom into a small island in the middle of the Pacific called Majuro Atoll. It's in the Marshall Islands, Majuro, Majuro Atoll. Go look at that thing on Google Maps. First of all, you got to find it on Google Maps, and you zoom in, and it's a tiny little atoll. So basically, it's a tiny little strip of Earth that's poking up, like a ring of Earth that's poking up in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's tiny, and then you find out that there's a runway on that, and you zoom in and you zoom in and you zoom in and you keep zooming in on the thing until you finally see on the very southern edge of this thing, they basically flattened part of the it's not even an island. It's literally a ring of small land that's, they have one road on the whole island because that's all that you can fit on there. It's a small little ring, so that's all you have room for. And they basically flattened part of the southern atoll and paved a runway. So I have video actually of me landing, coming into land there, and you turn into the final approach to the runway, and there's water on both sides of you and a tiny little strip of land in front of you to land on. So that kind of stuff is what, I mean, that's what I love, you know, getting out, exploring the world in places that a lot of people, my guess is a lot of people will probably never visit that place. I mean, the majority of people will never ever set foot there. A good majority of people may never visit the ice caps in Greenland, the small glacier areas that I've landed in these remote runways in the middle of Greenland, in these fjords, that you're literally landing on a runway on the edge of a water bank that's facing a giant iceberg, a big glacier that's moving toward it. They're incredible, and I say that not many people may visit. My hope is that more people will get out and go explore the world that way.
Right.
Because what I've learned in being out and traveling is that the world is, you can't, National Geographic and Discovery Channel, even movies like this, you know, games and movies, they help people understand a little bit more of what's out there. But man, you cannot experience it, you cannot know until you go out and see what it's really like, and you stand in that place and you breathe that air and you meet the people. You know, that's a thing that I've really come to understand, is that people, and even in the video games, you know how many people you meet when you're working your way through the structure of a video game. You come in contact with all these people, especially more and more now in games. These games travel the world. You go to all these different areas. You meet people from all over the world, different cultures, and you have these conversations and you learn more about the people. Well, when you go and you travel, you really get an idea for the rest of humanity, the rest of the world. And I think in the end, honestly, even games like Uncharted, I think somebody like Nathan Drake he's got a great sense of humor, he's got a great wit, he's definitely got a big set of cojones, and he just moves out in the world and goes and finds, he's got a passion and he's driving towards something. But I don't think a guy like that can get through the life that he has without having a good understanding of the people, because he travels all over the world, and you have to be able to get along with those people. You have to be able to understand them. You have to be able to communicate with them in some way. And I think that's a good message. You know, get out there and explore the world, see more of it, get out and go meet those people who you don't see except for on the news or something like that, which, you know.
And I think that's one thing that's interesting, because I think that there can sometimes be a difference between someone maybe being thinking of an adventurer as someone who might swoop in and like do something like a cave dive or jump out of a plane or do a quick exploration, and maybe you know, just do that with the party that they bring in, and then maybe do actually meet with the people. And I remember in the podcast you talked about how you went to I think it was in India, and you were on the train, and you know, you were talking about how people were climbing on the train, and then you went to a town, you were playing soccer with the children, and you know, they never really saw like a Caucasian American before, and it was like you interacted with the people. So it's like, it's different to actually be there and actually talk with people, and not just, you know, swoop in with the group you were with and then swoop out. You know, did you have like more experience with that, where you actually, you know, really got to meet with the people and had like a real, you know, close-knit experience?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, man. You know, I love jumping out of planes. I've base jumped off bridges. I've spelunked into caves and swam with, scuba dive with sharks. So I dig all that stuff. I dig all of it. I mean, I continue to explore and push my own limits that way. But what I've found, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that those guys, those kids and that was actually it was in Africa. It was in Morocco. It was in the Medinas in Morocco. So we went into these little Medinas, these cities in Morocco, and you're walking around and you're meeting people who don't encounter a whole lot of, especially in these small areas, they don't encounter a whole lot of white people, from the U.S. So they're really intrigued. Equally, I'm intrigued by them. And you mentioned those kids I played soccer with. I have a picture hanging on my bedroom wall of me with those kids. I'm holding one of them in my arms, and the rest of them are standing around. We get the soccer ball there, and that's what I have hanging on my wall, with a lot of other stuff from around the world. But that's one of the pictures I have, because in the end, I can jump out of airplanes and base jump out of off of bridges and everything else. But in the end, it's the people. It's people around the world. It's the human contact that you have that I find in all my travels over the years is the most important part of my journey. Honestly, when I'm out flying these planes around the world, I'm sometimes in these small planes filled with gas. I mean, we retrofit these small planes and take out the interiors, and we put these huge metal gas tanks in there. So you're literally sitting in a pilot seat surrounded by fuel. You're pretty much flying a bomb. That's pretty much what it is. It's a big flying bomb. So I'm in there a lot of times, most of the time by myself for long periods of time as I'm over the Pacific, and then I'll land or Atlantic or whatever. I'll land. And that's the best part of the thing, is the interaction after 14 or 15 hours in the seat. You land and you get to get out and interact with people. Because I travel such great distances at one time, every time I land, I'm in a different country, a different part of the world, a whole different culture, different languages sometimes. So you don't really have much if you're there by yourself the entire time, I mean, there's definitely times to take off and go have solitude, and I get plenty of that as well. But in the end, when you travel, my experience anyway is that when you travel, you want to be with people. You want to be around people. You want to be able to interact and learn more, because that's how you really get a real appreciation for what this world's about, like what it has to offer. Which again, even taking it back to the gaming, is exactly what Nathan Drake is doing. There's no way he gets through all the trials and tribulations that he has to get through and discovers what he needs to find if he's just by himself and he never has help from anybody else.
There's got to have been some really awesome places. Speaking of, that solitary part, there must have been some awesome places you visited where you just stood there and you're just like, taking a picture, like either a glacier or a waterfall or a mountain, and you're just like, holy cow, I'm standing here and this is incredible. I mean, how many of those have you been at where you're just like, this is incredible?
Oh man, more than I can count, and I count my lucky stars. I'm thankful every time I get to head out and go have another adventure like that, because I really don't take it for granted. I really appreciate those times, and I do. That's why I have those times where I can stand, and whether it's standing up north staring at the northern lights, the aurora borealis up north, and watching those things play all over the sky. In fact, I spent some time in Saipan in the Mariana Islands on this last trip, and there's a cave, a well-known cave on the island. That Saipan was well known during World War II, especially for a lot of the really horrific battles that took place there between the U.S. and Japanese and Korean forces that were battling for control of that island during the war. So of course, when you go there and you stand in the middle of the jungle, you can still feel the weight of that. You can who died in that place. It's a really weird energy that you feel when you walk there, and I imagine it's like that for a lot of people who travel to these places around the world. But I remember there's a cave there, and the cave was actually closed. It was a while back. It was open to the general public. You can kind of walk into the edge of the cave and get in there and look around a little bit. It was closed, so they weren't really allowing anybody in there. So of course, I get back into the jungle and I kind of sneak around the side and I find my way into the cave on my own. But I get down into the cave, and there's an old rickety ladder that's, I think the people that were in the cave before had built and set down in, so you could get down into the main area of the cave and then climb down and get into this cave. And there were no lights in there. I mean, you weren't supposed to have anybody in there. So I actually ran back out to the car that I had with me, grabbed my headlamp, and ran back into the cave. And then I climbed down that ladder into the pitch black. I didn't even know it was down there. So I climbed down, and I get down to the floor of this thing, and I'm standing down there, and it's pitch black down there, and there's a tiny little ray of light coming in from the opening up above, and it's dead quiet. You know, there's nobody around, and I stood in there knowing that a lot of especially at the end of that war, a lot of the Japanese soldiers that were on the island that was being overrun by a lot of the Allied forces were hiding in this cave, basically waiting to die. They were kind of trapped. They were hiding in fear of their lives, and they had gone down into this cave. So, you know, I see, you know, you go up and you see these huge, majestic things like the Northern Lights up near Greenland, and they're very awe-inspiring. But at the same time, I have these experiences like this, standing in this cave, feeling the weight of all of these people that were in there before, and it's amazing, and it's got its own beauty, but it also helps, I think, instill you with this sense of wonder in a different way, where you realize how amazing this planet is, and how much there is to go explore when you get out and go do these things, and to try to take everything in. It isn't just about looking at the pretty painting, the pretty picture, the ideal thing that you see on a postcard. It's getting into the real humanity of it, the realness of where you travel, where you explore, and realizing that there's beauty in all of it. There's amazingness in all of it, and that's one of the reasons why I keep going out and exploring. Because every time I go out, even if I plan a trip, I plan a destination, I plan on what I'm going to do, I always end up finding something that comes along spontaneously that throws me for a loop. And my journals that I've journaled with for years as I travel, all of the best, most memorable experiences I have were all things that I did that I didn't expect to do. They were all spontaneous experiences. So part of that is just get out. Just get out and go do something different. You know what I mean? I mean, even if you live in a city, go up to a different part of the city that you don't normally go to. And just see what's going on over there. You know?
Oh yeah, adventure doesn't have to always be across the world. It could be
no, not at all.
A few feet out of your house.
Not at all. I mean, if you have really what it is, man, it's a mindset. It is. It's a mindset of wanting to go explore, and part of exploring is just being open to meeting new people. You know, that's an exploration. Like I said, you can go across town and explore the other part of the city, and you are exploring. You're seeing something different. You're meeting new people. You just have to be open to it. And that's part of, you know, honestly, not to digress into a whole nother topic, but part of, I think, the issue that we run into where people are so prejudiced against other people around the world is because they just simply don't understand. They may listen to a TV show or the news or something else that's telling them what's going on over there. But I can promise you, what you hear over here about what's going on in the rest of the world is completely different than what you experience if you actually will go over there and see for yourself. Because we end up getting we get downloads of stuff here that are given to us by other people's experiences, and your experience, if you go over there, is going to be completely different. You're going to have your own experience. You know what I mean? I mean, you just are. So I think it would open a lot of people's eyes up if we get more and more people out traveling and exploring the world. And again, you don't have to leave the U.S. even to do that, but I think a lot of times it's great if you have that capability or the ability to take off and go for some adventures outside of the country that you live in, then it really opens your eyes. It opens your eyes a lot. And I say that also because even staying at home here in Venice, California, it's a huge tourist destination for people from all over the world. So over the years, I've met thousands and thousands of people from all over the world just down here at my local beach, just being down there, hanging out, working out, running on the beach. I meet people from all over the world and talk to them all the time. And they're all out seeing things for themselves, which
And logically, it makes sense too if you think about it, because if you think about in the past where there was less communications, people stayed mainly in their own neighborhoods. There was a lot more prejudice, and then you expand out and you meet more people. Even online, as you started to meet more people, you play games with more and more people. Yeah, you may have people say things just to get a rise out of you, but there was less and less actual prejudice. You get together with all these people that you meet and you play games with, and you're not actually prejudiced. You may rib each other and say things, but you're less prejudiced. But then you have the global stage, and you may say, oh, those people over there are X. But then if you actually went and meet these people, you're like, wait a minute, they're not like how I saw them on this newscast or read about them on X. But that's what you have. You have to keep going and expanding.
Yeah. And look what happens too, man. You have back in the old days. I mean, you have it a little bit here, but it's slowly moving out and moving out. You have people you're completely separate by race or nationality, and that's who you marry. You only marry within that certain small little group of people. And nowadays, you got people across nationalities and across races who are intermingling and intermarrying. So you end up with even the kids from these marriages are a mix of all these different places of the world, all these different cultures. So even in a few more generations, I think the world in general is going to have it's going to be much more of a melting pot of people, where you're just by the nature of who your family is, because of this side come together for these people. You're going to have people who are going to develop an understanding of a culture or a race of people that they or being able to get along with. And I think that's kind of where it seems that we're going. So it seems inevitable to me, and why not get a jump on it now? Why not get out there right now, get a jump on that, and go out and start meeting people around the world and experience what their life is about? Because you know what? We're all human at the end of the day, man. That's all we got. So.
Now, as far as the experiences that you have, it must have made it easier to do things that just would cause other people to be either nervous or shy. I mean, just as far as even doing auditions and things like that, your experiences as far as doing extreme sports, as far as going out and doing adventures, it's just as far as even like doing interviews. I guess pulling the curtain back. In the past, going and doing an interview, it would have been nervous for some people, but after you interview people for a while, you become less nervous at doing it. So the same, I would assume, apply for you. Going even further, would you say that because of doing, your adventures or extreme sports, has that helped you in some of your roles? Other things that you have done, has it made it easier to do certain acting roles? I would assume, like when you played even Nathan Drake, even though you weren't doing that many speaking or things like that, just the fact that you've done action things before in your actual day job, per se, would you say that gave you more of a leg up?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that a lifestyle like that sort of I don't know if it breeds it into you or you have to have it before you choose to do stuff like that in life. It's a general fearlessness. So like you're talking about going on meetings and meeting people and doing interviews and those sort of things that, I think they make some people nervous. And I get nervous from time to time, depending on the job that I'm doing. I've played roles that, I just sit back and I go, I'm kind of terrified of what I have to do here. I really don't understand, this character or what's happening, or it's a little bit scary in terms of what it means in terms of like being a real person and having to let real emotion or real feeling out, and it makes you kind of vulnerable, And I've kind of grown up as a guy, who's like out running around, climbing mountains and stuff. So having that the other part of that where you try to like break some of those walls down and actually be vulnerable to these characters for a part of that is that general fearlessness of being an adventure person. Like, well, I was nervous the first time I jumped off a bridge with a parachute on, but if you don't ever push yourself to a certain place, and everybody's different. I mean, everybody has different limits, but that general sense of I know that there's something at the other side of that, so why not just jump in? So I think that sense of adventure carries over into other roles and acting and everything else. Anytime I go do anything, it's I sit down with that. And again, every time I fly a plane, I mean, every time I roll onto the runway with a plane, and these planes, they're kind of the way I told you, they're configured where the center of gravity and the weight is much greater than what they are normally supposed to fly at. So they're very delicate machines to fly the way we fly them. So every time I pull onto a runway and throw the throttles forward, I'm thinking, all right, is this thing actually going to fly when I get to the end of the runway? So I have to come to terms with that too when I'm doing that job. So most of the aspects of my life lead me down a path of trying to approach fear or uncertainty and figuring out a way to move through it, But I still get scared.
Is it more like, is there ever like a fear of like actually doing auditions itself, or is that at this point with all the different work you've done, is it just like, hey, I'm just going in and it's just
No, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of it. I am probably the world's worst auditioner. I'm really bad at it. And you can work on it. I mean, there are some people. I have plenty of friends who they seem to have no problem with it. I am awful, man. I am just the worst. When I go into meetings, it's like a train wreck. I am a mess when I go into those meetings. So when I find that I have the most fun when I meet a collaborative group of people that I can shoot a project with and kind of come together from the beginning and work on that project and develop it. When I go in to meet on a brand new thing that I don't know anything about, yeah, it's it's sad. It's just sad. It's not really a pleasant experience. But again, in this industry, in the business that I'm in Hollywood, it's kind of part of the game. So I have gotten better. I mean, I have become more comfortable with my uncomfortability, I guess, over the years. But it's never been easy. I don't know if it ever will be easy for me. When I work the jobs, when I do the job, when I get to go out and actually be part of it, then I feel much more comfortable. I feel like I'm part of that family, and I feel like I get to create and be creative with everybody else who's part of that project. But yeah, the meetings suck for me. They just do. Some people love them, man. I hate them. They suck.
So last time when we talked, I didn't really get to go through this, and just want to quickly go through a couple of these, because these were shows that I watched a lot back in the day, and I was looking through your IMDb page. So I just wanted to ask you briefly about this. So like just starting back in 2001 with Spin City, because I like that show, and I saw that you were on that. So I mean, what was that like? Because one of the things, I watched a documentary, and there were actors talking about that, and one of the things that I found interesting was because I go to school for film production, and there's people in there who want to be directors, writers, and people want to be actors as well. And one of the things that the professor was talking about is that a lot of people have this idea that that a lot of, especially actors, that especially young ones, everyone thinks, oh, I have to be, superstar, millionaire, or bust, and if they don't have that, it's a failure, and then they give up. And then the documentary that I saw on Netflix was called That Thing That He Was In, or That Thing That They Were In, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about how there were actors that were prominent that have been in hundreds of shows, and it was great. I mean, I knew every person there, and I've seen them hundreds of times. Mm-hmm. And they were just talking about how the challenges of coming onto a show, maybe they were there one episode, two episode, and but it's a challenge because you're not the main cast. Mm-hmm. But it's great to still be on there. So I was just curious about that aspect of you're on a show that is going to be on there for many seasons, but you're just there for maybe an episode or two.
Yeah, it's a a lot of people will describe it as a pretty tough, one of the harder parts of one of the harder roles to play are these small roles that kind of end up showing up on a show like that for an episode or two. And you kind of, like you said, you got to step in and try to come up to the speed. The entire cast and crew who's part of the show regularly, they have a rhythm. They're kind of like a train that's moving, and you got to try to run along the side of the train and jump on while it's going, and then work at the pace that they're working at, and kind of keep everything up. So that's part of, I mean, that's part of the job, but it can present a challenge, especially if you have like the Spin City role was a small role that was actually one of my very first acting jobs when I first came to Los Angeles. I shot that in 2000, and I had only been in LA for 2.5 months when I got that job. And it was an amazing experience. I even remember on the job, Richard Kind, one of the actors on the show, I remember standing just off of this, and that show was shot in front of a live studio audience. So we were on, it was taping night, we were taping the show, and the audience was out there, and I was standing off in the wings, sort of in the dark, watching one of the other scenes, and all of a sudden this guy just kind of like moves up next to me, and in his voice he's like, "Well, what do you think? Are you having a good time?" And I was like, and here I am showing up in LA to do this show, a show that I had watched for many seasons before as well, and had seen him and liked him, and there he is standing next to me, having a conversation with me while we're both getting ready to go shoot a scene together. So that was a pretty surreal experience. But yeah, showing up into those cast and crews that have been together for a while can be a little bit daunting. You got to just show up and have your act together, literally, and do your work. So it can be a little bit more fun sometimes when you're on a show that is already going, that's already popular, because that there's a sort of an ease about the way everybody works. And I found that in a number of different shows that I've worked on, where you get on and many seasons into the show, and they kind of have a routine. So you just kind of show up and you follow in the routine and you do your thing,
And the next show that I watched a little bit of, not a lot, but was Charmed. And that show was interesting just because of the witches aspect and the actresses that was on there. So what was that like working on that show?
Yeah, it was funny because and it has a big following. You're right. It has sort of a kind of a cult following, that show does. There's a lot of extra websites and places that that people log a lot of the information about the show and talk about the show when it was on. And yeah, that was interesting that I went and shot that show on a day when the actress that I was working with on screen was pregnant. Not on the show, but she was pregnant in real life. She was having a baby. So they were trying to minimize her time on set. So she and I met and talked briefly, but she and I actually shot the work that we did, the scene that we shot together. We weren't together. So they turned the camera on her, they shot her stuff, and then she took off and went and laid down again because she was tired all the time from being pregnant.
Oh, man.
So that's just another example. That's just a typical thing that happens a lot of times, when we shoot these jobs, where one of the other actors won't be there when you're actually having a conversation with somebody and the camera's on you. They may not even be across from you when you're talking to them. So that presents its own set of challenges. But yeah, it was fun. It was a fun job.
Now, what was interesting about the next one, N.C.I.S, is that from what I'm seeing, in one you were playing a named character, and in the second one it was uncredited. So in the second one, was it just a character where it was like kind of like he didn't have an actual role?
It was actually the other way around. The first episode that I shot was uncredited. It was just a military guy. I was just a guy. I don't even know. I think I was an MP. I think I was one of the military police on the show. But that was a result of meeting the casting director and the crew and everybody else on the first job when I had booked the first episode to go shoot that. I just I got along with everybody, and we worked really well. So they had me back to read in a different season for another character, because the character wasn't. I guess they determined that there wasn't enough damage that could be done by the same actor playing two different roles, because the first role was small enough and it wasn't pivotal to the story, so that I could show up in a couple seasons down the road and a different character and have it be something else. So that's what happened. They asked me back to read for a different character a couple years later, and I ended up going and shooting that episode, which ended up being a pretty intense episode. That was the season finale where one of the main characters who had been on the show for a long time ended up dying, and that was the prelude. You know, that episode that I shot was the prelude to that entire thing happening. So, not to ruin that for anybody who hasn't seen that season of N.C.I.S yet. Sorry, spoiler. But actually, if you haven't seen it by now, I don't know. You must not be a fan because that show's been around for a long time.
Yeah, there's a statute of limitations on spoilers.
Yeah, I think so. Right? I feel okay. I don't feel as bad now. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, you've done a lot of work in between. So I mean, I'm just going over the just picking and choosing.
Yeah, well, a lot of those TV shows or things, those are interspersed throughout the years, and a lot of the other projects are smaller films and little projects that I do either on my own. That's just kind of the way this business here works, especially since I have a couple different jobs. I come in town and I'll work on something, and then I'll leave town again for a while and then come back. So.
And I'm picking this one, Hot in Cleveland, because it's recent, so I want to talk about something recent. Yeah. And also being down here in Miami, especially with LeBron, going back to that godforsaken town. So, I mean, if you could tell us a little bit about Cleveland. And while you do, I'm going to burn this LeBron jersey while you do it. So,
wow. Wow. There's no love lost over there in Miami. Wow. All right.
I'm just kidding, but actually, I like that show, and I was looking at the your on your Twitter page, and I saw that you actually got to meet Miss Betty White, and that's awesome.
That was a career highlight, to be honest with you. I have loved that woman for so many years, and now I was not to date myself too much, but I was a kid. I'd watch Mary Tyler Moore's show and the Golden Girls and those shows, like especially with my mom growing up as a kid. She'd have that show on all the time, and Betty White was. Now she's a little bit older than my mom. In fact, that woman is 90. She's now 92. She's 91, 92 years old and still going. And she's amazing. Still rocking and rolling. She's really funny, too. Doesn't need a lot of help to land those jokes on the show. She's still coming up. She's still incredibly witty. She's an amazing woman. But she always reminded me of a little bit older version of my mom, sort of that innocent, gentle, like 50s mom kind of way that Betty White is, where she comes across really like sarcastic and sometimes sadistic in the way that she is, but her joke, she comes across, the way she presents it is so innocent. You can't help but love that woman and everything that she does. And I love her dearly. We had a chance to talk for a little bit while I was on set shooting, and she is just, I think she's everything that somebody would imagine her to be. She's just the kindest, gentlest woman, and that it really was. We took a couple pictures together and spent some time talking, and it was amazing. That particular episode had a couple other really fantastic guest stars in the episode as well, some really beautiful women, and I think it was funny because there's a bunch of really attractive young women walking around set, and I'm doing the best I can to move through all of them so I can get over and talk to Betty White for a while, sit down on the couch and talk with her. But she is amazing. She was amazing. Actually, that entire I was able to. I had some friends on another sitcom for a number of years that I would go and visit on the set from time to time, and some of the producers of that sitcom were also the producers on Hot in Cleveland. So it was a good opportunity, sort of a small reunion for me too, because when I got back on set, we were able to reconnect and talk a little bit, and that was a lot of fun because it felt like I was going back to see a little bit of family there, which was and they're a really, really fun cast and crew. Just a lot of fun. And again, you're back in front of a live studio audience, which is becoming more rare in Hollywood these days. So many things are shot on their own now. So it was fun to be back in that element again. I started it on stage in theater when I was a young kid, so that's kind of where I've always gone back to. And, it's kind of like doing theater, just with some cameras around.
Now, I know that you said that, with before that, you do you grew up and you did play games, but of course with everything else that you're doing, especially with acting, with your business, with adventure sports, it's not like you get to play a lot of games. But have you been able to play any games recently, or has it been
Well,
mostly
no,
business?
actually, I don't. I haven't played any of the new games, but actually, a few months ago when I was in town, I went to a friend's birthday party, and part of the party was that in one of the corners they had an old school NES, like the original NES gaming system set up with all like those old Zelda cartridges. All those cartridges were set up. They still had them. They still worked. I mean, you had to, how you have to open the gate and finesse the cartridge in there and then get it down just the right way and then get the. And we had to do that. But we were playing Metroid. We were playing Contra. All these great old games. I think what's the Contra code? It's like up, up, down, down, left, right, BA, or whatever it is to get the extra guys so you can finish. We were doing all of that, man. It was great. We spent the entire night playing all these old games, which, again, for me that's my childhood. That's where it was Super Mario Brothers, and I remember beating all those games in the nights, and where I remember whose house I was at and who I was playing with and everything else. So those games are a big part of my childhood. So that was I'm still awful. I'm still terrible at those games, even with the old square controller. I needed a lot of help, but you pick up pretty quick. It was a blast, man. That was so much fun. It almost made me want to go back out and try to buy a retro NES gaming system or something, just to have around the house.
Hey, maybe that's what you could we could put together like a Contra movie. I could see you playing maybe one of those Contra guys. That'd be cool.
Yeah, yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. Those guys always reminded. They were like little Rambo guys. They just like running around doing their thing with the tanks. That was a fun game. Yeah, I mean, I literally have friends who grew up, even girlfriends who grew up playing in college, who have little like quilted Contra like things that they hang on their wall. I mean, people have crocheted Contra blankets and stuff. I mean, it's insane. Some people just really get into it. It's awesome.
So what's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm back in town for a little bit. I'm going to be I'm starting a project, a small project, a small film project that I'm going to be producing. I'll also be acting in it, and I'm working on that with a good writer-director team, a couple friends that I've been close with for a number of years here in town, and we've decided to start doing a couple projects together. And after that, I leave. We're going to start that project, then I leave over. I'm going on a couple other out of town adventures. I'm going to head down to South America in December and do some diving. I'm going to dive in the Galapagos Islands and hike the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, I think. I've been wanting to get down there for a number of years. And then I got to head to, where do I go? January, I think, is Indonesia. I'm heading to Indonesia on another adventure in January. And then when I get back, it's back to town and start shooting again. So we're gonna start working on a couple of those projects that I'm producing, and those will probably be like the Sundance or Tribeca film festivals, places like that. That's probably where they'll end up to start with. And then you never know, the jobs here, especially town in LA, you just there's stuff that comes and goes all the time. So whatever else fills in those gaps, I'll be there. I'll be a part of it. On top of staying in touch with having my agent and management team stay in touch with all the people who are getting ready, hopefully, to put an Uncharted movie together and get that franchise off the ground.
Yeah, awesome, and we definitely love to see that. So we'll definitely be keeping up on everything that's going on with you, and hopefully we'll be able to get some news, some good news. Because I mean, even if it doesn't end up being everything, hopefully there'll be something, and that we'll be able to see as some kind of project along with that. Because I think that would be awesome, and I'm sure that the fans would love to see that. But,
I mean, I'd love to see it as well. I'll be stoked to be a part of it, and I'd love to see it in any capacity. But you're right. I think the fans deserve to have that film made.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I'm rooting for it. I'm rooting for it just as much as everybody else is.
Well, definitely. I was going to say that your life, especially with everything that's going on, is a life that a lot of us guys want to live. But as you said, it's not something that is unattainable. Anyone can go out and do it. All they have to do by getting out the house and start making those moves, and it starts just by getting up. So
yeah, and you can. It is attainable by anybody, and you can have everything. It doesn't mean you have to give up. If you're a hardcore gamer, continue to be a hardcore gamer. Just maybe roll in a little bit more with it. If you already like to be outdoors, then just figure out how to get out and go explore a little bit more. It's you don't have to change your entire life to do those kinds of things. There's extreme examples of everything, but having a little bit of it balance out, I think, is great. That's I look forward to seeing a lot more of you guys out, just meeting me out in the middle of nowhere, hanging out. That's what it's all about. So more people out there, the better, I say.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this man, guys. I mean, he acts, he games, extreme sports, does it all. Ryan, thanks for coming on and talking with us. We hope to have you back on the show soon. But,
yeah, Jay, my pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, and tell everybody to stay in touch too. When they're get on Twitter and follow around and let your voice be heard, both about the film, what you want to see. Let people hear that. That's great. And you can always connect through my Twitter profile as well if that helps. You get the word out. I'll repost stuff for you as well. So.
And that's at Ryan_Culver.com, right?
That's right. Yeah, hit me up on Twitter and say hi. Love to hear from you.
All right, awesome. All right, guys, we'll be back very soon with another episode of the Obsolete Gamer Show. But until then, remember our motto, never stop gaming. And we're going to add another one, get out and have some adventures outside of gaming as well. All right, guys? We'll be back soon.
All right.